The bell above the door jingled softly as Mark pushed it open, his little girl's hand tucked securely in his. It was late, the kind of evening where the streets outside felt quiet and heavy, and all he wanted was a warm meal and a moment of peace with his daughter. Life as a single dad hadn't been easy, juggling 2 jobs, bills piling higher than he could manage, and the constant worry of giving his child the stability she deserved. But tonight, he promised himself he would focus on her smile, her laughter, the small things that made the weight of the world just a little lighter. The diner smelled of fried food and fresh coffee, its booths cracked with age and neon sign flickering in the window. There weren't many customers inside, just a couple in the corner and an older man sipping soup. Their waitress appeared quickly with menus in hand. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with tired eyes that carried a story of their own. She smiled as she greeted them, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the heart, thin and fragile like glass about to break. Mark noticed the way she tucked a strand of hair nervously behind her ear, her hands trembling slightly as she poured their water. It wasn't anything obvious, but there was something in her demeanor, a heaviness, a silent struggle, that caught his attention. He glanced at his daughter, who was happily coloring on the paper placemat, unaware of the storm quietly brewing inside the stranger who had just taken their order. Mark tried to focus on his daughter's chatter about her day at school, but his attention kept drifting back to the young waitress. She moved quickly between tables, apologizing for every small thing as if the world might collapse with each mistake. When she carried a tray of plates to the booth near the window, her hand shook, and one glass tipped over, spilling water across the table. The sound was small, but it felt like thunder in the quiet diner. Almost immediately, the manager swooped in. His voice was sharp, cutting through the room with a sting that made even Mark flinch. "You need to pay attention." "How many times is this tonight?" he barked, not bothering to lower his tone. The girl's cheeks flushed deep red as she scrambled to clean up the mess, murmuring apologies again and again. Her eyes stayed down, her shoulders hunched, as if she were trying to shrink into herself and disappear. Mark's daughter looked up from her coloring, puzzled. "Daddy, why is he yelling at her?" she whispered. Mark didn't answer right away, his chest tightening at the sight. He had been in that place before, overworked, exhausted, treated like he was worth less than the job he did. The look on her face wasn't just embarrassment, it was the silent plea of someone carrying far too much, and not knowing how much longer she could keep standing. For the first time that night, Mark felt an ache that went beyond his own struggles. Mark tried to push the moment aside, to remind himself that he had his own worries to carry. But as the waitress returned with their food, her hands still trembling slightly, his daughter leaned across the table and whispered, "Daddy, she looks sad. Can we help her?" The words were soft, innocent, but they struck him harder than anything. Out of the mouths of children came truths adults often ignored. He looked at his little girl, her wide eyes full of compassion, and something shifted inside him. He didn't have much, barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but he remembered nights when he'd sat in his car, unsure how he'd make it through another day. He remembered the single act of kindness that had kept him going once, a stranger who didn't even know his name. Now, watching this waitress fight to keep herself together, he realized he was being given the same chance to do something that mattered. Mark reached into his worn wallet and thumbed through the small stack of bills. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than he could comfortably give. Still, his daughter's hopeful eyes told him the answer. When the check came, he signed it quickly, folded the bills inside, and on a napkin scribbled a few words that came straight from the heart. He slipped the note under the receipt, leaving it where only she would find it, then sat back quietly, waiting for her return. When the waitress returned to clear the table, she moved with the same weary rhythm as before, eyes down, voice faint. She reached for the check, and for a moment, it seemed like just another routine task in a long, unforgiving shift. But then she noticed the folded napkin tucked beneath it. Curious, she opened it, and froze. Her breath caught as she read the words scrawled across the paper, "We all have hard days. You're not alone. Keep going, you're stronger than you think." Her hands trembled as she lifted the check slip and saw the bills inside. It wasn't just a small tip, it was a sum large enough to matter, especially to someone who looked like she was holding her world together with threads. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. She pressed the napkin to her chest, her composure breaking in the middle of the quiet diner. With shaky steps, she rushed back toward the booth where Mark and his daughter Saturday. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice cracking. You have no idea. I was about ready to give up tonight. I didn't think I could keep doing this. Mark looked up at her with calm, steady eyes, then glanced at his daughter, who smiled brightly, almost proudly. In that moment, the heaviness in the waitress's expression began to lift, replaced by something fragile yet unmistakable, hope. Mark didn't let her finish. He gave her a gentle smile, the kind that carried quiet understanding, and said softly, "Someone once helped me when I needed it. Now it's your turn to keep going." His words weren't dramatic, just honest, spoken from the place of a man who knew what it meant to feel broken and still choose to stand. The waitress wiped at her cheeks, nodding as if the weight she carried had just been lightened, if only a little. She whispered a heartfelt "thank you" before stepping back, clutching the napkin like it was a lifeline. Around them, the diner seemed different, warmer, less empty, filled with the invisible ripple of a kindness that had taken root. Mark stood, reaching for his daughter's hand. As they walked toward the door, the little girl looked up at him with a wide grin. "Daddy," she said proudly, "we helped her." He squeezed her tiny hand and replied, "Yeah, sweetheart. And one day, maybe she'll help someone else too." The bell above the door jingled again as they stepped out into the night, leaving behind more than just an empty booth. They left a reminder, that even in the hardest times, the smallest act of compassion can spark a change no one expects. And as the waitress watched them disappear into the dark street, hope flickered inside her, stronger than it had been in a long, long time.